Stacy Hall.
And I'm Kathy Nuneham. We made this videotape of the Reading Mastery 3 program so that you would have an opportunity to get to know the Reading Mastery 3 program and become an effective Reading Mastery 3 teacher.
We'd like to give you a basic understanding of the Reading Mastery 3 program, which includes the skills that are embedded in the program to teach each of the students, the parts of each of the reading lessons that are within the whole program, and a rationale for the program components as you work with them, and the techniques to use.
We're also going to give you an opportunity to see each of the parts of the lesson being taught, and we'll be demonstrating that throughout this video.
We're also going to provide a discussion of each of the components, the presentation skills that teachers need to use, techniques for working with children who may make errors as they're working in the program, and strategies that the children will learn to become better leaders.
We're also going to give you lots of practice at doing the different formats within the program, and we're going to stop and have you practice these things too. We're going to show you these things as we practice throughout, and to do this you're going to need one of the things from your kit, and that's the Reading Mastery 3 Teacher's Guide. So if you don't already have the Reading Mastery 3 Teacher's Guide in front of you, stop the videotape and get that now.
The Reading Mastery 3 program is quite unique, as is the entire Reading Mastery series. For example, it's been proven for success with a number of different types of children, not only the general education students, but students with diversity, such as students with disability, students for whom English is not their primary language, students with language problems as well.
One of the things that makes this successful with diverse learners is that there's no assumption that the students come in having the background knowledge for whatever particular task they're engaged in. All the skills in the program are directly taught by the teacher, practiced by the students, and reviewed again and again so that students can acquire those skills.
The skills are reviewed in multiple contexts as well. So the students aren't just reviewing a fact, for example, again and again and again, but that fact will build up into rule relationships that the students work on, across different stories that they have, from their stories to their workbooks and their independent work.
Another unique feature is the integration of content area skills in science and social studies in the Reading Mastery 3 program. Students are exposed to mapping concepts in science that they will typically be taught in third grade, and those skills are integrated within the reading program, both in comprehension activities, skill book activities, so that it's strengthening students' skills in other academic areas as well.
Finally, the language of instruction in the Reading Mastery 3 series is controlled. What we want to do is to ensure that the language that gets to the students is consistent and very meaningful, so the presentations are working very hard on the skills that the students need.
Your teacher's guide will serve as your training manual during this video series. It provides program rationale, important sample exercises, specific information on how to present the exercises, and correct predictable student errors. It also includes procedures for placement, grouping, and scheduling. In addition, the guide includes a scope and sequence chart, behavioral objectives, a template for skills profile folder, and a vocabulary list which tells the lesson number on which each word in the program first appears. Your teacher's guide can be an invaluable quick reference. The Reading Mastery 3 books that all instructors need to use to teach each of the 140 lessons are the 2 teacher presentation books that specify every lesson's activities, including how to correct errors. Just as in the first 2 levels of Reading Mastery, each teacher presentation book contains scripted lessons. Scripts indicate exactly what you do in black italics and what you are to say in colored print. They also indicate correct student responses in bold type. The script wording is designed to be concise, consistent, simple, and clear. Every activity and every exercise is planned to be functional and serve a purpose in moving students from teacher-directed instruction to independent application. Each lesson includes many exercises. Each exercise includes a series of instructional steps to teach a particular skill or strategy. These exercises or formats appear for each lesson. What the teacher does and says remains the same, consistent. The only difference is the examples presented in the exercise. Later formats usually build on what was presented in earlier formats. There are 2 storybooks in the Reading Mastery 3 program. If possible, every student should have these storybooks. However, minimally, you will need to have enough storybooks for each child in your largest instructional group, plus a few extra. For every student in Reading Mastery 3, you will need to have 2 consumable workbooks. The Reading Mastery 3 program is organized into carefully sequenced, scripted daily lessons that begin with about 35 minutes of teacher-directed work. First are the word attack exercises, which take approximately 10 minutes to complete. During these exercises, you present decoding and vocabulary building strategies with words that will appear in the stories and independent workbook exercises. Next, in mini lessons, you direct students through a comprehension passage, which introduces concepts that will appear in the story. You also direct students through oral reading on the main story and ask comprehension questions indicated in the script. The comprehension passage and main story reading will take approximately 25 minutes to complete. Following the story reading, students will do their independent workbook exercises, which contain the application of the concepts and strategies they have learned from the word attack, comprehension passage, and main story reading. Allow approximately 25 minutes for students to do this work. After students have completed workbook exercise, you will conduct a work check. This activity takes approximately 10 minutes. Every 5 lessons, another activity is included as part of the lesson. This is an individual checkout for rate and accuracy. In these checkouts, children read individually to the teacher. On lessons with checkouts, the comprehension passage and story are shorter, so you can complete the teacher-directed part of the lesson and also do checkouts. Another kind of activity that is included in the program every 10 lessons is a fact game. You may schedule these games during the regular period or at some other time in the day. These are game-like activities in which critical concepts are reviewed. Each game takes about 25 minutes to play and provides review and practice for concept application. Reading instruction should be scheduled on every available school day. Remember, allow at least 35 minutes for the teacher-directed work for each instructional group. This period should be the same time every day. The independent work does not necessarily need to be scheduled immediately after the teacher-directed activities, but may occur later in the school day. Ideally, while you are teaching one reading group, children from the other instructional groups need to be engaged at completing their independent work. Work checks may be done immediately after students complete their work or later in the day. However, they must be scheduled to occur before students go on to the next lesson. Your goal for your reading group is to complete a lesson each day. Occasionally, you will find that you will not be able to complete an entire lesson during the instructional period. When the choice is between teaching to mastery and completing the lesson, choose the teaching to mastery. Try to schedule extra time later in the day to finish the lesson. If you have no time during a particular day to complete the lesson, complete it the next instructional day and then begin the next lesson, if you have enough time during the same period. Some students may require more practice to develop acceptable accuracy and fluency levels. Schedule extra practice for these students. They can reread earlier stories to a parent or another child. Finally, be prepared to establish motivational systems and record the performance of students on reading the stories. Show the children that you value accurate reading. Read more about motivation and point systems on pages 18 and 19 of your teacher's guide. Before you start teaching your students, you will need to determine the initial placement into the appropriate level of the Reading Mastery series. Reading Mastery 3 was designed for students who read at about the 3rd grade level. The program can be introduced following the student's successful completion of any second-level reading program, whether the students are 2nd graders, 4th graders, or possibly remedial 7th graders. However, if students cannot read aloud with 2 errors or less per 100 words read, or if students read very slowly, they may not be able to enter Reading Mastery 3. On page 50 of your teacher's guide, you will find the placement test. Pages 48 and 49 provide you with the directions for administering the test, placement criteria, and remedies. Find and read the placement information on those pages. Four transition lessons labeled A, B, C, and D precede Lesson 1. These transition lessons are appropriate for students who are somewhat weak in decoding and comprehension skills. Read more about the transition lessons on page 4 of your teacher's guide. After you have placement test results for all of your students, place them in instructional groups according to their performance on the placement tests. Homogeneous grouping is necessary so that you can enable all children to progress at optimal rates while providing a successful learning experience. To achieve appropriate homogeneous grouping, cross-class and cross-grade grouping may be needed. Ideally, you should have no more than 2 instructional groups. The group with the higher performers may contain up to 15 students. The group with lower performers might contain up to 10 students. After testing, teachers should meet to discuss their grouping. If someone has too many different placements, switching children to different classes should be considered. Grouping should remain flexible throughout the year based on students' performance. To use the available instructional time efficiently and effectively, you will use techniques that will help you keep your students engaged. This video provides training in those techniques. They include following the scripted presentations and bringing them to life with rapid pacing and natural emphasis on key words, using signals to cue students when to answer so each is able to initiate responses, and monitoring students' responses closely so that appropriate feedback may be provided, reinforcement or corrections. Read more about these techniques on pages 17 and 18 of your teacher's guide. One of the techniques you will use when presenting an exercise to students is to use a signal to cue them when to respond. Signaling has several purposes. Signals allow the teacher, rather than the students, to control the pacing of the presentation. The teacher determines how fast to move through the exercises depending on how much time the children need to think before they respond. So the signaling technique makes it more likely that children will initiate their own responses to instruction instead of just copying the responses of the other children in the group. An effective signaling procedure has 3 parts: focus, verbal cue, and hand signal. First, you focus the student's attention. If your students are supposed to be looking at you while you ask a question, you have them focus by holding out your hand, like a traffic cop. If the group is supposed to be reading their storybooks or workbooks, you tell them to touch under what they're going to read. In either case, you allow students enough time to think of the appropriate response before you require them to respond. After you have paused for thinking, then you give a verbal cue. In this program, the verbal cue to answer a question is, "Get ready." The verbal cue to say a word is, "What word?" If the students are looking at you, your hand signal is visual. You move your hand. If students are touching their storybooks, your hand signal is auditory, a snap, clap, or tap. The order of the signaling procedure is always the same. First the focus, then the verbal cue, and then the hand signal. Watch and respond on my signal. Everybody, which direction is Canada from the United States? Get ready.
North.
How did you do responding to my visual cue? Let's try an auditory cue next. Touch the next word. What word?
Hammered.
Hammered. Notice that the timing was consistent between the verbal cue and the hand signal. Now we will start your training on these and other DI techniques. On page 20 of your teacher's guide is a sample from lesson 85 of the word attack section of the lesson. Your lesson will always start with the word attack words, where you'll have students decode each of these words, and they'll practice these to mastery before they have to read them in their stories. The word attack is set up in columns of words. The words in the first column are new words that you will be introducing and teaching to the students. The words in the other columns, in this case, columns 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, are words that students have already been introduced to, or are review words or words that the students will be able to decode on their own. The last column, vocabulary words, is a column of words where the students will read the words, and then you will be working with vocabulary meanings, teaching them what those words mean.
All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. First word. What word?
Peanuts.
Good, waiting for me. Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
You guys are awesome. Column 3, first word. What word?
Quietly.
Next word. What word?
Brief.
Next word. What word?
Saw.
Next. What word?
Post.
Next. What word?
Hammer.
Yes, column 4, first word. What's that name? Get ready.
Bertha.
Next. What word?
Track.
Next. What word?
Tracker.
Next. What word?
Cell.
Right on, column 5. Go touching under the words. What word?
Wing.
Next. What word?
Amaze.
Next. What word?
Amazement.
Next. What word?
Lemon.
Next. What word?
Blink.
Yes, good watching those endings. Column 6. What word?
Sunny.
Next. What word?
Lazy.
Next. What word?
Lazier.
Next. What word?
Normal.
Next. What word?
Normally.
Good reading. Let's do column 7.
Here are critical teaching behaviors specifically related to presenting word attack exercises. Always start by giving the instructions to students using the wording specified in the script. This clear wording directs the students to touch the appropriate column and appropriate word in the column. Immediately after you give that kind of instruction, the script says, wait, or check, or pause. This means you look at the student's fingers to make sure they are touching under the correct word and to make sure they have time to figure it out. So you always pause and monitor before you say the verbal cue, what word, and signal. Watch as I follow the script and monitor during step 1 of exercise 2. Everybody touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. Let's practice that together using those techniques of following the script and monitoring students. You're on exercise 2, don't forget, on page 20 of your teacher's guide. We're going to be teaching step 1, where it says everybody touch column 2, all the way through where it says touch under the first word. You're going to be the teacher along with me, so get ready to say those words when I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Everybody touch column 2. Are you checking your students that they're touching the column? All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. Are you pausing so students have think time? Even though you must monitor your students, you want to maintain a rapid pace to maintain student attention and maintain the momentum of your lesson. Let's practice that again with exercise 2. You're going to say these words, but this time I'm not going to prompt you. You still need to stop and monitor your students and give them the pause for some think time. When I say 3, we're going to begin with step 1. 1, 2, 3. Everybody touch column 2. The words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. How did you do that time? Now we're going to practice giving the verbal cue and signaling together. Remember, when students have to look at the words in their own material, your signal needs to be auditory. A snap, clap, or tap. I'll demonstrate using the verbal cue and hand signal. What word? Notice the signal always comes a moment after the verbal cue. Here's the wrong way. What word? I signaled at the same time I was talking. Remember, never talk and signal at the same time. Here's another wrong way to signal. What word? I paused too long after what word. That would make it difficult for students to know when to respond. Here's the right way again. What word? Let's practice the timing of the signal together. I'll snap with one hand and keep my place on the script with the other, but you can clap or tap if you wish. On the count of 3, we'll say, what word, and signal. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. What word? Again. 1, 2, 3. What word? One more time. 1, 2, 3. What word? Now watch as I present the whole exercise. You'll hear one person being the student. Everybody, touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Good job. Now let's practice teaching that whole exercise together. Remember, you're on page 20 of the teacher's guide. On the screen, you will see the student on their page and their textbook. Remember, you need to pause a second after you have said next word and before you say what word and signal. See if you can stay with me throughout the demonstration. We're going to start teaching on 3. 1, 2, 3. Everybody, touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Good job. Now I'm going to show you how to teach columns 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to be using exercise 2 and 3 from your teacher's guide on page 20. Follow along, and if you want to, see if you can practice with me. I'm starting on exercise 2. Everybody, touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Nice job. Everybody touch under the first word in column 3. What word?
Quietly.
Next word. What word?
Greeks.
Next word. What word?
Sod.
Next word. What word?
Post.
Next word. What word?
Hammers.
Super job. Everybody touch under the first word in column 4. What word?
Bertha.
Next word. What word?
Track.
Next word. What word?
Trackers.
Next word. What word?
Sailed.
Nice job. Now practice teaching columns 2, 3, and 4 in pairs. You'll be using exercise 2 and 3 from your teacher's guide in presenting these columns. Be sure you pause a second after you say next word. Then crisply say what word and signal. As soon as you finish presenting one column of words, have the students move quickly to the next column. When you're acting as the student, don't make any errors. Give feedback to your partner as you practice. Both of you should get a chance to be teacher. During the first few days of instruction, your students may not behave or respond the way you want them to. They might not answer on signal or respond crisply. You will want to correct this kind of responding. Watch me as I demonstrate this. Everybody, touch the first word in column 2. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
However. Say it that way. What word?
However.
However. Good job. Let's go back up to the top. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Good. Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Listen again. Blindfold. What word?
Blindfold.
Good. Let's go back to the top and see if you can respond crisply and be ready for my signal. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Better. Good job. Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Playground. Good. That was much better that time. Notice that I modified the introductory sentence of the format into a specific expectation for performance. If your students don't answer crisply, that is, they say the correct word but drag it out, you change their behavior by stating specifically what you want, then quickly correct. Tell the word, ask the word, Then, start over. Praise specifically improved performance. As with any interaction with students, maintain a brisk pace. Leave no time for inattentive or off-task behaviors. When used appropriately, you'll find these effective motivation procedures will allow you and your students to have fun as you integrate your own unique personality with direct instruction formats. Now practice how you would get crisp responses. When you're acting as a student, hesitate or drag out several responses, but don't say the wrong word.
Everybody find part A in your textbook. Touch column 1. Everybody, when we do word attack, remember to follow along with your finger and touch under every word. First word. That word is student. What word?
Student.
Spell student. Get ready.
S-T-U-D-E-N-T.
What word did you spell?
Student.
Next word. Donkey. What word?
Donkey.
Spell donkey. Get ready.
D-O-N-K-E-Y.
What word was that?
Donkey.
Next word. Directly. What word?
Directly.
Spell directly. Get ready.
D-I-R-E-C-T-L-Y.
What word was that?
Directly.
Good job. Next word. Talent. What word?
Talent.
Spell talent. Get ready.
T-A-L-E-N-T.
What word was that?
Talent.
Excellent spelling. Go up to the top now and see if you can do them. All the words. Remember them. First word. Good touching. What word?
Student.
Next word.
Donkey.
Wait for me. What word?
Donkey.
Let's start that column again. First word. What word?
Student.
Next word. What word?
Donkey.
Next word. What word?
Directly.
Next word. What word?
Talent.
Absolutely perfect. Go to column 2.
What the teacher script does for the first column is identifies the new word for the students. The teacher actually models the word. Then the students will spell the word, and they repeat and practice those words.
The reason the students are spelling the words is not so that they'll learn how to spell those words. These are brand new words for the students to learn. And by spelling them, they must look closely at the word and identify the letters that are in the word. In doing this format also, you'll notice that the teacher is saying the word several times, the students are repeating the word several times, so the chances that they will learn these new words the first time around is pretty good.
So now what we would like to do is to practice this exercise together. I'd like all of you to practice being teacher with me. I'll be the teacher, and Kathy will be the student. So you are going to be saying the words that I say that are written in the format on page 20 in your teacher's guide. We'll begin with exercise 1. We're going to be doing, exercise 1. We'll begin with number 1 and go all the way through. So read those directions with me. This is an opportunity for you to practice those signals that we worked on earlier.
So make sure you get that hand up there.
That's right. And make it very clear for the students that you're working with. Kathy, here we go. Starting at number 1. Get ready? Everybody, find part A in your textbook. Let's see if she's there. Great. Touch column 1. She's there. The words in column 1 are hard words that will be in your reading stories. Touch under the first word. There she is. The first word is student. What word?
Student.
Spell student. Get ready.
S-T-U-D-E-N-T.
What word did you spell?
Student.
Good. Next word. That word is donkey. What word?
Donkey.
Spell donkey. Get ready.
D-O-N-K-E-Y.
What word did you spell?
Donkey.
Excellent. Next word. That word is directly. What word?
Directly.
Spell directly. Get ready.
D-I-R-E-C-T-L-Y.
What word did you spell?
Directly.
Last word. That word is talent. What word?
Talent.
Spell talent. Get ready.
T-A-L-E-N-T.
What word did you spell?
Talent.
Excellent. Now we are at step 5 in the exercises. Everybody see where we are? Let's teach. Get ready? Now let's see if you remember all those words. Touch under the first word in column 1. What word?
Student.
Next word. What word?
Donkey.
Good. Next word. What word?
Directly.
Next word. What word?
Talent.
Excellent. You read all those words without any mistakes. Nice job. Now, one of the things that's very important when you're practicing being teacher is that you say the words that are in the script for the teacher. Don't practice being the student. It's real easy to get into practice of answering for the student, too. And what you can teach your children is to watch you to get the answer instead of paying attention to the words in the textbook. Doing doing this together is kind of a difficult thing. I would recommend that you stop and practice and do this on your own. Go through exercise 1 without any mistakes.
Okay, everybody, we're ready for column 2. First word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Billfold.
That word is blindfold. What word, everybody?
Blindfold.
Blindfold. What word is that?
Blindfold.
Spell blindfold. Get ready.
Blindfold.
What word did you spell?
Blindfold.
Let's try that again. Up to the top of column 2. First word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. Be careful. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Awesome. You got them all right. Go to column 3.
If one or more students in a group say the wrong word, you'll tell the word, have the group say the word, then have them spell it, then ask, what word again? And finally return to the beginning of the list. That correction is almost the same as the new words format you just practiced. I'll demonstrate the correction and firming the group on the list. Everybody touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Billfold.
Blindfold. What word?
Blindfold.
Spell blindfold.
B-L-I-N-D-F-O-L-D.
What word did you spell?
Blindfold.
Yes, blindfold. Let's go up to the top again. First word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Next word. What word?
Playground.
Nice job. Now let's practice that correction together. We're going to be on exercise 2, and we'll start teaching. Our student's going to make the same error on blindfold, and you're going to correct it with the spelling format, then go back up to the top, and you'll notice that I gave a little extra think time on that word. See if you can do that with me. We'll start teaching on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Everybody touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Billfold.
Blindfold. What word?
Blindfold.
Spell blindfold.
B-L-I-N-D-F-O-L-D.
What word did you spell?
Blindfold.
Yes, blindfold. Let's go back up to the top again and touch the first word. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Next word. What word?
Blindfold.
Blindfold. Next word. What word?
Playground.
Good job. That's playground. Now let's practice in pairs, presenting exercise 2 and 3 for columns 2 to 4. The person acting as the student should make 1 error in each of those columns. Firming means that children are provided with adequate practice to retain the skills that they've been taught. We find that if a teacher provides sufficient repetitions to enable children to respond correctly to all the items in an exercise, the next day the number of repetitions they need to master a similar exercise will go down significantly. When you do firming, the children let you know how much practice they need on a skill to master it. For those of you working with low-performing students, you will find that it takes many repetitions. To keep those students attentive and motivated while providing these repetitions, remember, maintain a brisk pace and be positive and encouraging. The general format you use to teach to mastery is called the part firming paradigm. You teach to mastery the part where the error was made, then repeat the whole exercise. The first step in the part firming paradigm is to tell the answer. Then you repeat the task. You ask students to respond to the same task they originally missed. Then you repeat the part where the error occurred. Then go to the next part, repeat the exercise, and finally give individual turns. It is essential to set up instructions so that children know that responding correctly the first time is important. Responding correctly the first time demonstrates that students remember what was taught earlier. How you arrange the physical setup of the group can influence instruction. You must be able to easily see and hear students' responses. When you begin teaching Reading Mastery 3, you will also need to preview lessons in order to be familiar with the material you will teach. After you have taught the program for a while, you will start to recognize which of your students may make errors, which words are difficult for them, and the type of errors that students are likely to make. To encourage correct responding the first time through an exercise, you can provide more than a second or two of thinking time on newly introduced words or previous error words. After students correctly read those words, you may confirm by repeating their responses. In addition to pausing longer on some words and confirming correct responses, you may present quick pre-corrections or cues before you have students try to read difficult words. Pre-correction procedures increase accuracy by focusing students' attention on critical features of the words before you signal them to respond. I'll demonstrate using pre-corrections and how to use techniques to motivate students to attend carefully and work hard to read the words correctly the first time through the whole list. Everybody touch column 2. All the words in column 2 are made up of 2 shorter words. Touch under the first word. Don't forget to answer crisply. What word?
Peanuts.
Peanuts. What word?
Peanuts.
Good. Let's try that column again, and don't forget to answer crisply. What word?
Peanuts.
Next word. What word?
However.
Good. Nice answering fast. Next word. Be careful on this one. What word?
Blindfold.
Blindfold. Next word. What word?
Playground.
Playground. You got them all right that time. That was very good. Let's go to column 3. Touch under the first word. Careful on the ending on this one. What word?
Quietly.
Quietly. Next word. What word?
Greeks.
Next word. What word?
Sod.
Next word. What word?
Post.
And next word. Careful on the ending again. What word?
Hammered.
Hammered. You got all those endings, and I like the way you were answering on signal.
Good reading. Let's do column 7, everybody. Vocabulary words. First we'll read them, and then we'll talk about what they mean. Put your finger under the first word. What word?
Failed.
Number 2. What word?
Gift.
Number 3. What word?
Sense.
Number 4. What word?
Peak.
That's right. Okay, everybody, when we're talking about the vocabulary words, touch under the words that we talk about. Touch under number 1. That word is failed. The opposite of succeeding is failing. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Here's how you say the opposite. She failed in school. Your turn. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed in school.
Perfecto. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded at her job. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed at her job.
Absolutely right. Touch part 2 or touch word 2. That word is gift. A gift is another way of saying a present. Touch under 3. Good touching, everybody. Word 3 is sense. Another word for a feeling is a sense. Here's another way of saying the feeling of sight, the sense of sight. Another way of saying the feeling of touch is the sense of touch. Your turn. What's another way of saying the feeling of smell? Get ready?
The sense of smell.
Right on. What's another way of saying the feeling of taste? Get ready.
The sense of taste.
Right on. Word 4, everybody touch. Word 4 is peek. When you sneak a quick look at something, you peek. Here's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother. She peeked at her mother. Your turn. What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother? Get ready?
She peeked at her mother.
What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look through the window? Get ready.
She peeked through the window.
Yes. Now I'm going to call on each one of you to read a column.
Okay, now that you've practiced the word attack up till this point, you'll notice we've made it all the way to column 7, which are our vocabulary words. We're going to introduce the students to vocabulary words that are going to be in their reading stories. And this is a very good vocabulary program because you as the teacher will introduce these words to students over a series of a couple of days. You will not simply give the students a definition and expect them to remember the words. The words will be reviewed the next day, the students will use the words in sentences, and then eventually those words will show up in the story reading and students will be asked questions again that have to do with the meaning of those words.
Right, and additionally the students will have to remember those words for some of the work activities that will be coming up. So it's really important in this case to follow the format of the program because it's very carefully introduced in sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look at what the vocabulary words exercise looks like. We are now on page 21 of the teacher's guide. And we're at the top of exercise 4 for the vocabulary words. Let's start off with just a model. Kathy's going to be the student and I'm going to be the teacher. And our first time through we will not have any errors. And just follow along as I work through the format. Everybody, touch column 7. First you're going to read the words in the column, then we'll talk about what they mean. Touch under the first word. What word?
Fail.
Next word. What word?
Gift.
Next word. What word?
Sense.
Next word. What word? Peak. Good, reading those words. Now let's talk about what those words mean. Word 1 is fail. The opposite of succeeding is failing. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Here's how to say the opposite. She failed in school. Your turn. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed in school.
That's right, she failed in school. Good for you. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded at her job. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed at her job.
Excellent. Now what I'd like you to do is to join me teaching at task C. Everybody get ready. Word 2 is gift. A gift is another way of saying a present. Word 3 is sense. Another word for a feeling is a sense. Here's another way of saying the feeling of sight. The sense of sight. Another way of saying the feeling of touch is the sense of touch. Your turn. What's another way of saying the feeling of smell? Get ready?
The sense of smell.
Right. What's another way of saying the feeling of taste? Get ready?
The sense of taste.
Excellent. Now we're moving on to task E. Word 4 is peek. When you sneak a quick look at something, you peek. Here's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother. She peeked at her mother. Your turn. What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother? Get ready?
She peeked at her mother.
That's right, she peeked at her mother. What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look through the window? Get ready?
She peeked through the window.
She peeked through the window, good using that word. That's what the exercise looks like for vocabulary. I had to follow each of the words that were for me in the script very carefully.
This would be a good time for you to practice the vocabulary format. So stop the videotape now, start at exercise 4, task A, follow the teacher script all the way to the bottom.
Now let's talk about what happens if students make mistakes. That will happen in vocabulary just as it can happen in decoding and in story reading. What we'll do is take a close look at task B, in which we're asking the students to talk about the word succeeding or failed, and the opposite is succeeding. What I'd like to do is to demonstrate for you what's going to take place. I'm basically following the part-trimming paradigm. Watch as I teach Kathy, and she's going to be making an error in this particular exercise, and you can find the opposite. Now let's talk about what those words mean. Word 1 is failed. The opposite of succeeding is failing. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Here's another way. Here's how to say the opposite. She failed in school. Your turn. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She didn't succeed in school.
She failed in school. Say that sentence.
She failed in school.
Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed in school.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next sentence. Listen. She succeeded at her job. Say the opposite. Get ready?
She failed at her job.
Good. You got it that time. Nice work. The corrections here are really telling the answer and repeating the task. And the part in this case is going to each of the individual numerals in task B. Now what I'd like you to do is task B with me. I want you to take the role of the teacher. Kathy will continue to be our student, and we'll do the correction for the error that she made. You follow the script very carefully and get ready to make that correction using the part from me paradigm. Here we go. Now, let's talk about what those words mean. Word 1 is fail. The opposite of succeeding is fail. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Here's how to say the opposite. She failed in school. Your turn. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready.
She didn't succeed in
She
school.
failed in school. Say that.
She failed in school.
Good. Your turn. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded in school. Say the opposite. Get ready.
She failed in school.
Good. Listen to this sentence. She succeeded at her job. Say the opposite. Get ready.
She failed at her job.
She failed at her job. Nice work. All right. What I'd like you to do now is to join me moving on into task C and then on to task D. Kathy will make an error somewhere, and we need to all be prepared to correct her using the part for me paradigm. Remember that when you go back up to the top of the part, it's the numeral within the task that we'll be dealing with. Let's start at task C, which is word 2 for the students. Everybody ready? Good. Word 2 is gift. A gift is another way of saying a present. Word 3 is sense. Another way for a feeling is a sense. Here's another way of saying the feeling of sight. The sense of sight. Another way of saying the feeling of touch is the sense of touch. Your turn. What's another way of saying the feeling of smell? Get ready.
The sense of smell.
Excellent. What's another way of saying the feeling of taste? Get ready.
The taste.
The sense of taste. What's another way of saying the feeling of taste?
The sense of taste.
You got it. Let's go on to part word 4. Word 4 is peek. When you sneak a quick look at something, you peek. Here's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother. She peeked at her mother. Your turn. What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look at her mother? Get ready?
She peeked at her mother.
You got it. What's another way of saying she sneaked a quick look through the window? Get ready?
She peeked through the window.
She peeked through the window. Good work on the vocabulary. This would be a great time to stop and practice all of exercise 4. There's a lot of teacher wording. You want to be very familiar with it before you sit down and work with your students, and be prepared to correct at any point. So now you've had a chance to see what the vocabulary section of every lesson in Word Attack is like, and you've seen what the corrections need to look like. But you may have some questions. So Kathy and I have kind of put together some of the common questions that we've seen as we work with people in Reading Mastery 3 and the vocabulary section.
One of the things that I noticed that people seem to want to do is they want to define the words themselves to the children, or they want to call on children to give the definitions, thinking, well, if the kids know, wouldn't that be better to do?
Would be saving them time if they wouldn't have to follow the script. And one of the things that we want to make sure of is that the students understand the words as the words are going to be used in the program, and that's one of the reasons to follow the script so closely.
Also, because you want to involve all the students in your class in answering and learning to use those words, if you call on an individual student, there's a lot of other students in the class that will not practice with those words or might not be listening to the student giving the answer.
And it's real important that all the students are getting the practice. These words are going to be seen a number of times before they show up in the story and in the comprehension exercises that the students need to do at the end of the lesson.
Another thing that we did is when we practiced the errors that the students might make in the vocabulary tasks, one of the things that students do sometimes is they use the word in the sentence correctly, but the sentence doesn't come out right. So they might include some extra words that shouldn't be there, or maybe in changing the sentence, the noun-verb agreement kind of disappears. In which case,
the part for me paradigm still holds.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we want to do is to tell the students the correct answer. So we'll just model the sentence as it needs to be stated for the students, and have the students state it correctly, and then follow through in the regular part for me procedure.
One of the things, again, that we want to emphasize is how important it is to follow the script, because that's going to help guide the way in which you introduce the definitions to the children, the way in which they practice them. And because these words are going to show up 7 or 8 times within the program following the introduction of the word, you're going to want to make sure that you have introduced the correct definition and the kids have had lots of practice on those words before they need to be on their own interacting and understanding those words in the context of the stories.
One of the things that we haven't mentioned about the Reading Mastery 3 program is that all of the formats and all of the stories that we have in the program have been field tested. In other words, children have practiced these, and we've changed and worked the formats to be the most efficient that they can. So we know that these are going to work well with children, and that's why we recommend and want you carefully to follow the formats as they're written.
Now I'm going to call on each one of you to read a column. If you read all the words correctly, you will earn 2 points. Watch here. Column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Column 1. Read your words. Read the words in the column to yourself, everybody. Make sure you know every single word perfectly. Get ready to read. Everybody, remember what column of words you're going to read, but touch the column of words that someone else is reading out loud. Ryan, would you read your column? What column?
4.
Column 4. Everybody touch column 4. Go for it.
Bertha, Tracker, sailed.
You just made 2 points. Sarah, what column?
3.
3. Everybody touch 3.
Quietly, Greeks, sawed, post, hammered.
Excellent. You just made 2 points.
The very last part of the word attack exercise is to call on individual students to read a column of words. That part of the format isn't in your teacher's guide, but every single presentation is going to follow the vocabulary column with calling on individual students to read a column of words from the word attack section. To do this, you'll want to get all the students participating by looking at the page, even though you're only going to call on one student. So you will see Tracy do a specific technique where she'll have everybody touch a column of words, and then once everybody's touching that column of words, she'll call on an individual student to read that column.
Although I've got one student in front of me, I'll be calling out different names. So listen carefully as I get the students ready for their individual turns on the word attack. All right, everybody, now it's time for individual turns. We finished all of the words in this lesson and the vocabulary words. Let's go back and see how you can remember them all by yourselves. Everybody, touch column 3. Let's see who's going to get column 3. Kathy, read the words in column 3.
Quietly, Greeks, sawed, post, hammered.
100% on column 3. Everybody touch column 5. Ready for column 5? Joe, read the words.
Blink, amaze, amazement, lemon, blinked.
100%. Way to go, Joe. Everybody touch column 1. Read the words in column 1. Susan.
Student, donkey, directly, talent.
All the words in column 1 were 100%, Susan. Way to go. Let's go on to column 4. Everybody's there. Jose, read the words in column 4.
Bertha, truck.
Track. What word?
Track.
Spell track. Everybody, get ready.
T-R-A-C-K.
What word did you spell, everyone?
Track.
Excellent. Back to the top of that column. Jose, let's see if you can read those words 100%.
Bertha, track. Trackers, sailed.
100% is exactly right that time. And you would continue until all of the children will have an opportunity for one individual turn on the column. Kathy made a mistake, as Jose, and the correction procedure is going to apply for individual turns just as it applied as when you were reading the whole group. And you notice that I had the whole group answer within the spell correction, then Jose read the list by himself.
And that's important to do because if one of the students misses a word in the column, it might be a word that many of the students are having difficulty with. And also by having the whole class answer together, that one student doesn't get put on the spot. They get an opportunity to go back to the top and read that column again successfully.
They get their shot. One of the things, too, is that was paced very quickly. This is review. They've been through this entire list. They got it to 100% before you get to the point of individual turns. And so you can move rather quickly through that. Then the child will read the words at their own pace. I don't need to signal for each of the words in the list for that child. But as soon as that student's finished, I'm moving the group right on to the next list, get everybody focused on the next list, and then I call on the child to read that list for their individual turn.
Read more about individual turns on page 23 of your teacher's guide. You're going to practice in pairs giving individual turns. Here are the main techniques to remember during your presentation. Require everybody to touch the words. No signal is needed. If a student makes an error, include the group in the correction. Award points if you're using a point system. After you conduct word attack, the next activity you will present in many lessons will be a comprehension passage. In a comprehension passage, students are introduced to new facts, rules, and perspectives before they read about them in the story. For example, before students read the story Herman Heads for Japan, they are directed through the comprehension passage, More About the Globe.
Everybody find part B in your textbook. Remember to follow along with your finger, good touching. This is More About the Globe, and we have a globe here to do an exercise with in a minute. Lynetta, would you start reading, please? Read the title first.
Okay. More About the Globe. In today's story, you will read about a trip from New York City to San Francisco and then to Japan.
All right, everybody, where does the trip start? Get ready.
New York City.
Where does it go next? Get ready.
San Francisco.
And where does it go next? Get ready.
Japan.
Yes, good answers. Michael, would you read?
The map on the next page shows that trip. Touch New York City and go to San Francisco.
Everybody do it. Touch New York City and go to San Francisco. All right, Michael, continue.
In which direction do you go?
In which direction is that, everybody?
West.
Good, knowing your directions. Alexis, you read, please.
Now go from San Francisco to Japan.
Everybody do it. With your finger, go from San Francisco to Japan. Yes. Okay, Alexis.
In which direction did you go?
Everybody, what direction?
West.
Good, knowing your directions. Greg, read.
Which is farther, the trip from New York City to San Francisco or the trip from San Francisco to Japan?
Everybody, what's the answer? Get ready.
San Francisco to Japan.
Yes, San Francisco to Japan. That's right. Ashley.
Your teacher will show you a globe of the world. Find New York City on that globe, then go west from New York City to San Francisco. Then go west from San Francisco to Japan.
All right. Jameson, would you come help us? Find New York City. All right, and stand right here so everybody can see. Now find San Francisco. Yes. Now find Japan. Super duper. Which direction did he go? Get ready.
West.
Exactly. Good knowing your globe. Nice job.
Read more about the comprehension emphasis on pages 9, 10, and 11 of your teacher's guide. The comprehension passage teaching procedures and another sample comprehension passage appear on page 30 of your teacher's guide. Read that page now. Here's the comprehension passage part of lesson 39 as it appears in the teacher presentation book. Notice that the teacher presentation book has the script you follow to conduct the activity and also a copy of the student material. The circled letters in the student's material indicate that you will ask a question specified in the script. The words in boldface in the student material indicate that you repeat the information a student has just read and then have the group say it. Here's a summary of the teaching procedures you follow for the comprehension passage. Pick individuals to read a sentence or two while other students follow along, pointing to the words being read. Ask questions as indicated by circled letters and dots. Here's a demonstration of those techniques.
Okay, everybody, finger on the title. And what I want you to do is to read along, and when you get to the circled letters, keep your finger on the circled letter and look up, and I'm going to be asking you a question. Tracy, read the title, please.
Grams.
Continue.
In some stories, we've read about things that do not weigh very much. When we weigh very small things, we use grams.
Okay, everybody, what is the unit we use to weigh very small things? Get ready?
Grams.
Grams, good job. Gary, continue reading, please.
Here's a rule about grams. All grams are the same weight.
Everybody, listen to that fact again. All grams are the same weight. Say that fact. Get ready.
All grams are the same weight.
Good job. Tracy, continue reading.
If you had a block of water that was 1 centimeter on all sides, that block would weigh 1 gram.
Everybody, how much does a block of water, 1 centimeter on all sides, weigh? Get ready.
1 gram.
1 gram. Super job.
Now you practice conducting reading the comprehension passage using the procedures we just demonstrated. When you're acting as a student, don't make any decoding or comprehension errors.
You now know how to conduct the comprehension activity, having the students read and asking the questions, signaling to get a unison group response. As the students read, though, they will make some decoding errors. They might read the wrong word, add a word, substitute a word, and when students do make a decoding error, you're going to want to correct their error so that they get a lot of practice reading the words correctly and so that they can comprehend the passage.
That's right, because each time a child makes a response that's incorrect, that's actually practicing doing it incorrectly. We want to provide more practice of doing the skill correctly than having had practice doing it wrong.
We're going to demonstrate this to you by having Tracy be our reader, and she's going to read the passage on grams, and she's going to make some decoding errors, and watch as I correct her errors. Tracy, begin reading, please.
In some stories, you've read about things that do not want very
Weigh. What word?
Weigh.
Back to the beginning of that sentence, please.
In some stories, you've read about things that do not weigh very much.
Good. Continue.
When we weigh very tiny things...
Small. What word?
Small.
Back to the beginning of that sentence.
When we weigh very small things, we use grams.
Okay. What you saw was that Tracy made an error. She was reading the first sentence, and when she came to the word weigh, she said something else. And if she doesn't know what that word is, she might not understand what that sentence is. So I'm going to correct that error by coming right in with the correct answer. I said weigh, and then I said what word, because I want her to repeat that word to make sure that she understands what that word is. Weigh. What word?
Weigh.
Back to the beginning of the sentence. Okay, now it's your turn to practice with me. We're going to ask Tracy to read again, and she's going to make an error on the same 2 words. As soon as she reads the wrong word, come in with me, tell her the correct word, and then have her repeat that, say what word, and then back to the beginning of the sentence so she can reread the sentence. Tracy, go ahead and read, please.
In some stories, you've read about things that do not want...
Weigh. What word?
Weigh.
Back to the beginning of that sentence.
In some stories, you've read about things that do not weigh very much. When we weigh very tiny...
Small. What word?
Small.
Back to the beginning of that sentence.
When we weigh very small things, we use grams.
Very good. Okay, were you able to come in as quickly as I was? As soon as she read the wrong word, I came in very quickly. If I wait too long, she's going to get too far ahead of me, and then when I say the right word, it won't make any sense to her. So you need to be really alert. Think ahead about what the sentence is that the student's going to be reading, and as soon as you hear the error, come right in with the correction. Tracy's going to read the next sentence, and you won't know where the error is. So you need to be alert, listen carefully, and see if you can come in at the same time that I do.
Here's the rule about grams. All grams are the equal...
Same. What word?
Same.
Back to the beginning of that sentence.
Here's a rule about grams. All grams are the same weight.
Did you come in at the same time that I did? If you didn't, give this plenty of practice because you have to really work at it to get it very, very smooth. Once your students are used to these procedures, they will quickly come in, repeat the word, and go back to the beginning of the sentence for you.
You'll notice one of the things that Kathy did in her corrections is she was very polite as she said that to me. It doesn't have to be negative. Some people are concerned about interrupting students as they read. It's more important to get the correct practice of the word in and have that word heard correctly. So a nice quick voice and have the student return to the beginning of the sentence works just fine.
Okay, let's try that again. This time I'd like you to be the teacher along with me and a few other people who are here with me. Tracy will be our student and she'll be our only reader, but she'll still make some errors in decoding and we'll ask her comprehension questions. Practice with me in doing the error correction and in signaling for the questions. Tracy, go ahead and start reading.
Grams. In some stories, you've read about things that do not want...
Weigh.
What word? Weigh.
Back to the beginning of the sentence.
In some stories, you've read about things that do not weigh very much. When we weigh very tiny,
Small. What word?
small,
That's the beginning of the sentence.
when we weigh very small things, we use grams.
Everybody,
What is the unit we use to weigh small things?
get
ready?
Grams.
Yes, grams. Go ahead and continue reading, Tracy.
Here's a rule about grams. All grams are the same weight.
Everybody, listen to that fact again. All grams are the same weight. Say that fact. Get ready?
All grams are the same weight.
Good. Continue reading, Tracy.
If you had a block of went that
Water. What word?
water.
That's the beginning.
If you had a block of water that was 1 centimeter on all sides, that block would weigh 1 gram.
Everybody, how much does a block of water 1 centimeter on all sides weigh? Get ready?
1 gram.
That's right. How did you do? Were you able to stay along with us and do the error corrections for the reading? Were you good at your signals? We'd like you to take a lot more time to practice this so that you can become very fluent with your students when you're instructing them.
It may feel kind of awkward to practice with a number of teachers and one student, and it isn't how you're really going to be teaching. However, this kind of practice really will help you to get more comfortable with the signals, more comfortable with the formats, and really be ready to teach the children when it's time to get ready to do the lesson.
Now in pairs, practice correcting decoding errors and asking comprehension questions in that comprehension passage. Now find pages 12 and 13 in your teacher's guide, which is a copy of the teacher presentation book for Lesson 54.
You have a copy of this story on your teacher's guide on page 12, and if you look down at page 12, Part C is where the story reading begins. And the title of the story is Herman Heads for Japan. I'd like you to scan your teacher's guide and see the different parts of the story reading. If you run down Herman Heads for Japan till the end of that page and go up to the beginning of page 13, at the end of the first paragraph you'll see a mark that says the 2-error limit. Your story reading will always have a 2-error limit that is approximately the first 100 words of the story. If you take your finger and scan further down, or at the end of the kid's story reading, there is a second error limit. This particular error limit says 8, and different stories will have different error limits. The error limits tell you how many errors the students can make in this story, and you will be keeping track of those as the students read. Now I'd like to explain how the story reading procedures work for the first 100 words, or reading down to the 2-error limit. As you see in the textbook, there is a title for the story, and there are circled letters where the teacher is going to stop and ask comprehension questions. But when the students read down to the 2-error limit, they're not going to stop and work on comprehension during that first part. All they will simply be doing is reading with the teacher calling on different students to read different sentences down to the 2-error limit. If they make an error, the teacher will correct the error, and they will keep track of the number of errors that the students make. If the students do read to the 2-error limit with 2 or less errors, then the teacher is going to go back to the beginning of the story and read that first part, modeling good reading, and have the students answer the comprehension questions where the circled letters appear.
There are a couple things I'd like to point out about this particular part of the story reading. When the students are reading, it's group errors. So the entire group should not be making more than 2 mistakes down to the 2-error limit. And when the teacher comes back and rereads for the students, what needs to take place here is, as Kathy said, there's a model of reading for the students. The teacher should read at a level that's modeling good reading for the students, but not at a level that's way beyond the student's ability.
The students will be following along with their finger and stopping at the letters as the teacher asks the different questions. If the students do make it to the 2-error limit, the teacher rereads to the 2-error limit, asks the comprehension questions, then the students can continue on reading down to the final error limit for the story. And this time, the teacher will ask the comprehension questions as the students proceed. Let's go ahead and show you how that looks. Gary's going to join us as a student for our demonstration. Tracy and Gary are going to be students, and I'm going to be the teacher. Okay, everybody, touch Part C in your textbook. And Tracy, read the title, please.
Herman Heads for Japan.
Good, and start reading.
The jumbo jet landed at Kennedy Airport 5 hours after it took off from San Francisco. The passengers got off the plane, and the crew got off the plane.
Nice job, Gary.
Workers came and sprayed the inside of the plane with insect spray.
Continue.
After the air cleared, there were 6 dead flies and 1 dead ant in the plane.
Good job.
Tracy. But there was still one living fly. That fly had crawled inside one of the ovens. The oven had cooled some, but it was nice and warm.
Good. Gary.
By that evening, the oven was cool and Herman crawled out. Passengers were coming into the plane.
Super job. You guys read down to the 2-error limit and they didn't make any errors. I can go back now and reread the story and stop at the circled letters and ask the comprehension questions. And while I do that, I would like you two to follow along with your finger, and when I get to the circled letters, you stop and keep your place at the circled letters. Sometimes your students won't make it down to the 2-error limit with 2 or less errors, and then they'll have to go back and reread for accuracy. This is how you'd handle this as a teacher. Rather than go back and have them start at the beginning of the story, let's pretend that they read down to the circled letter D, and they're going to continue reading and try and make the 2-error limit. Gary, your turn to read.
But there was still 1 live fly.
Living, what word?
Living.
Back to the beginning of that sentence.
But there was still 1 living fly.
Good, keep going.
That fly had crawled inside one of the ovens.
Good job. Tracy.
The oven had cooled.
What word?
Cooled.
Back to the beginning of the sentence.
The oven had cooled some, but it was nice and warm.
Good job. Gary.
By that night,
Evening. What word?
evening.
Back to the beginning of the sentence.
By that evening, the sun was cool.
Oven. What word?
Oven.
Back to the beginning of that sentence and be really careful.
By that evening, the oven was cool and Herman crawled out. Passengers were coming into the plane.
Okay. You guys didn't make the 2-error limit that time. You made more than 2 errors. So we're going to go back to the beginning, to the title, and we're going to read down to the 2-error limit again, but you have to be really careful, but I know you can do it this time. Gary, why don't you start with the title this time?
Herman heads for Japan.
Okay? And what I'll do is I did keep track of the errors by circling the errors so I could quickly tell how many errors the students had made. I let them know that they didn't make the 2-error limit, and then I told them to go back and read that they had to make that 2-error limit, and they needed to read very carefully in order to do that.
One of the things about this section that's critically important is that the words that have been put in this first 100 words of the passage are words that have been recently taught in the decoding and the vocabulary section of the instruction. So we really want to make sure that the students are reading these with accuracy. We want good practice of reading the words the right way. And so that's why we emphasize decoding the first time through. When the students make the error limit, then we'll go back and we'll work on the comprehension questions.
The techniques that you will use to present the story up to the 2-error mark are: with brisk pacing, state specific expectations about reading to the 2-error mark with 2 or less errors. Keep other extraneous talk to a minimum. Also, state that all students will point to words so that they practice reading while only one student reads aloud. Make sure you are distributing turns fairly and getting adequate feedback on each student's reading. Choose a student to read a sentence. As soon as the student says the last word in a sentence, praise accuracy, then say the name of the next student who will read.
Everybody find part C? We're going to read the story about Herman. We're going to read the first part. We're going to go down to the 2-error mark, everybody. We're going to see if we can read this with 2 or less errors. If we read it with 2 or less errors, then I get to read next, and then you'll get to answer comprehension questions. Remember to follow under the word that you're reading. Everybody, let's read the title together. Get ready.
Herman heads for Japan.
Yes. Ryan, would you read?
The jumbo jet landed at Kennedy Airport 5 hours after it took off from San Francisco. The passengers got off the plane, and the crew got off the plane.
Thank you. Dale.
The workers came.
Workers. Your turn.
Workers came and sprayed the inside of the plane with insect spray. After the air cleared, there were 6 dead flies and 1 dead ant in the plane.
Caitlin, your turn.
But there was still 1 live living fly. That fly had crawled inside one of the ovens.
Yes. Kaylee, your turn.
The oven had cooled some, but it was nice and warm. By that evening, By that evening, the oven was full.
Good reading. We've read to the 2-error limit, everybody. You only made 1 error, so we get to go on. It'll be my turn to read and your turn to answer comprehension questions.
Now practice conducting the students reading the story up to the 2-error mark. People who are acting as students should make a total of 2 errors. After students read with 2 errors or less, then you model reading the passage and ask the comprehension questions. Here's a sample from the first part of the story.
Herman heads for Japan. What's going to happen in this story? Gary?
Herman's going to go to Japan on a plane.
That's right. Okay. Follow along as I read. The jumbo jet landed at Kennedy Airport 5 hours after it took off from San Francisco. Everybody, what city did the plane land in? Get ready?
New York.
New York. And what city did the plane land? Get ready?
New York.
New York. Good job. How long did the trip take? Get ready?
5 hours.
5 hours. How long did the trip going from New York to San Francisco take? Thumbs up if you know this one. Tracy?
6 hours.
6 hours. Good job. And why did it take less time going back to New York? What do you think, Gary?
Because the wind goes from the west and blows toward New York from the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, and so the plane was flying in the same direction, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Follow along.
As you model reading down to the 2-error mark, direct students to point to the words as you read. A common teaching mistake is reading this passage too fast. If you read rapidly, students may not be able to touch under the words as you are reading and may stop trying to pay attention. Instead, try to read with exaggerated expression and at a rate which allows students to follow along with their fingers. This provides a model that children can try to imitate. You must occasionally look up from your book to monitor to see if the children are actually pointing to words, and also ask the comprehension questions indicated in your script by the circled letters and the dots.
All right, everybody, we only had 2 errors, so we get to go on now, and it's my turn to read. Remember to follow along while I'm reading, and it'll be your turn to answer questions. I'm going to start with the title. Herman heads for Japan. Jameson, what's going to happen in this story?
Herman heads for Japan.
Right on. Everybody, I'm going to start. The jumbo jet landed at Kennedy Airport 5 hours after it took off from San Francisco. Everybody, in what city did the plane land? Get ready.
New York City.
New York City. Let's do that again. In what city did the plane land? Get ready.
New York City.
How long did the trip take? Get ready.
5 hours.
That's right. How long did the trip going from New York to San Francisco take? Get ready.
6 hours.
That's right. Sarah, why did it take less time going back to New York? Can anyone help her out? Vanetta.
Because the plane was going in the direction with the wind.
Exactly. Nice answer. Okay. My turn after B. The passengers got off the plane and the crew got off the plane. Workers came and sprayed the inside of the plane with insect spray. What does insect spray do? Greg.
It kills all the insects.
All right, good answer. My turn. After the air cleared, there were 6 dead flies and 1 dead ant in the plane. Ashley, do you think Herman is dead now? Let's find out. But there was still 1 living fly. That fly had crawled inside one of the ovens. Wouldn't he get burned up inside the oven, Michael?
No,
How come?
because the oven had cooled.
Let's see if he's right. After E, everybody. The oven had cooled some, but it was nice and warm. By that evening, the oven was cool, and Herman crawled out. Passengers were coming into the plane.
Now in pairs, practice reading to your students and asking the comprehension questions.
Your turn to read, everybody. Check at the end of the story and tell me how many errors you have for your total story. How many, everybody?
8.
8, yes, everybody. We've made One error. So how many errors more do we have to make? Get ready.
7.
7. Be reading very carefully. Let's start after the 2 error limit. Naomi, would you read, please?
Some of the passengers were going to San Francisco, but some of them were going a lot farther. They were on their way to Japan.
Okay, where was the plane going after it went to San Francisco? Get ready.
Japan.
That's right, and that's a long, long way. Katie, you read, please.
The jumbo jet was going to fly to San Francisco, and then it was going to continue to Japan.
Okay, where is it going to stop first? Get ready.
San Francisco.
Then where was it going? Get ready.
Japan.
You guys are really good listeners. Kelly, would you read?
After leaving San Francisco, the jet was going to cross the Great Ocean, called the Pacific Ocean.
Okay. Okay, Dale, your turn to read.
Herman, like other flies, had big, strange eyes that could see in all directions. At the same time, suddenly Herman's eyes saw something moving toward him very fast.
Good following along. Kelly, your turn.
It was a large, hairy thing with 8 legs and a mean-looking mouth.
Now, what could that be? Katie?
A spider.
Maybe a spider? Let's find out. Ashley, your turn.
Herman was stuck in a spider web, and the spider was ready to eat him.
What was the spider's dinner, everybody?
Herman.
That's right. What was holding Herman and keeping him from flying away, Katie?
He was caught in the spider's web.
Good answers. Everybody, we only made 3 errors the whole story. Excellent reading. Close your books. You can go back now when I say go and do your workbook for lesson 54. Remember to...
The procedures to conduct story reading after the 2-error mark changed several times during the first 25 lessons of Reading Mastery 3. Later, I'll explain the procedures for the early lessons, but right now you're going to practice the procedures for lesson 54. You direct individual students to continue reading after the 2-error mark while others follow along. Be sure to monitor students closely, correct all decoding errors, and ask comprehension questions. Most questions are directed to the entire group. Remember, you signal for those responses. However, occasionally, questions may allow a range of correct responses. Then you may ask several individuals for their answer. You don't need to signal when individual students are to respond. Now practice conducting the story reading after the 2-error mark for Story 54. Ask the comprehension questions as indicated. When you're acting as a student, don't make any comprehension errors.
Jameson, your turn.
Herman, like other flies, had big, strange eyes that could see in all directions at the same time.
Thank you. You know, you read all those words exactly correctly. But now, let's try reading again with expression. My turn, I'm going to read with expression. Herman, like other flies, had big, strange eyes that could see in all directions at the same time. Your turn. Read with expression.
Herman, like other flies, had big, strange eyes that could see in all directions at the same time.
Whoa, that was lots better. Thank you.
If children read too slowly or in a stilted, non-conversational manner during story reading, you can praise the student for reading the sentence without errors, then model the reading the same sentence slightly faster with exaggerated expression. Have the student try it again. Give specific praise for improvement. For more practice, have the children read previously taught stories to a partner later in the day. If you do this, make sure at first to supervise the students so they read accurately as well as practice fluency and reading with expression. Also, encourage children to read stories at home. Always be sure to watch your script carefully and watch for changes in procedures. During the beginning lessons of Reading Mastery 3 up to Lesson 25, the procedures after the 2-error mark vary from lesson to lesson. For example, for Lesson 12, you direct individuals to read 2 or 3 sentences while you ask comprehension questions indicated by black circled letters. If students meet the 6-error quota for the whole story, then you reread that part of the story and ask another set of comprehension questions indicated by regular circled letters. You use another set of procedures for Lesson 13. After the 2-error quota is met, you direct individuals to read, but you don't ask any questions. If students meet the quota for the whole story, then you model reading the last part of the story and ask all the questions indicated by circled letters.
There are a lot of common questions that we've seen as we've done training over the years, and one of the biggies that comes up is within that first 100 words to the 2-error limit, what if children read and reread and just can't make the 2-error limit?
Well, if they did that, I would really be concerned about their placement in the program. If you've tested your kids and carefully placed them, they should be at a point in the program where they're very successful with the reading. The other place that you might consider is the word attack part of the lesson, or the very beginning when you're introducing the words that are going to show up in the story reading. Have you done a good job firming students to mastery and make sure that they are confident readers of those words, so when they appear in the story reading, they'll be successful with those words?
Right, the word attack and the vocabulary and the comprehension sections are all set up for accuracy and success in the story reading, so it's real important to get that to a firm level. It's not something to just go through quickly.
The last place you might want to check is motivation. Are the students adequately motivated to make that 2-error limit? It's really nice to set up a challenge for the students and say, are you going to make the 2-error limit today? I bet you can. And if you're using the point system in the program, that also provides an extra motivator for students. And certainly your positive support for the students making the 2-error limit will help them feel like accomplished readers and provide a lot of internal motivation for them.
Right, the story reading, the word attack, the comprehension section are all fun components of the story. It doesn't have to be a drag to read. Another question that comes up quite frequently is, what if the students don't make the story reading error limit and there's not enough time to reread the entire story within the lesson time accommodation that you have for your program?
That often does happen, and in those cases, it always is important to reread the story because you want the students to know you will hold them to the error limit. I'd like you to consider how much time you have left in your lesson. And if there's not enough time to finish the whole story, you might want to wait and make that the beginning of your next day's lesson and have the students go back to the beginning of that story and read. And don't forget, when you're rereading, you're only reading for decoding. You're not asking comprehension questions. So it's really a pretty quick part of the exercise, probably about 10 minutes.
It can go really quickly. Another kind of a point that I think is important to make here is that the stories are really very interesting for the students, and they're often serial stories. The story that we just read to you about Herman the Fly is one that's been taking place for a period of time, and the children really enjoy it. So reading it with accuracy and understanding what's going on is very motivating in and of itself.
One of the other questions that sometimes comes up is that if the students are making more than 2 errors in the 2-error limit part of the story, how are they ever going to make the error limit for the whole story? That's pretty easy to solve because up to the 2-error limit, the students will only make 1 error. The students will only make 0 errors, 1 error, or 2 errors. If the students read with more than 2 errors and have to go back and reread, we'll only score it as 3 errors. We'll never count it as 4, 5, 6, or 7. Otherwise, it would jeopardize their ability to make it to the rest of the error limit for the story.
Right.
So if you do have to go back and reread, always remember it will always be 3 errors.
And the rereading is not a punishing activity for the students. It's a practice activity. We're going to get better at reading when we practice and do it the right way.
Another question that I have that I hear a lot is, what happens if it's only one student who's making the story reading errors? That most of the class is doing a real good job and you have one student that just makes all the story reading errors.
There could be a number of different reasons for that. It could be that the student is new to the group. They've been absent for a period of time. Some of the words that have been introduced in this story, they haven't been practiced as much for that particular child. It's really important in that case to know the children in your group and know what's taking place. It could be a number of different kinds of possibilities. If it were an absentee kind of a thing, the student hadn't learned those words, the teacher may decide at that point not to count those errors that that particular child is making and accumulate it into the whole count for the group, and work with that child and get them up to speed with the rest of the group. Another thing to consider is the placement of that particular child with the entire group. Is the placement for that student correct in relation to the other kids in the group? We don't want to hold the entire group back for one child, but by the same token, we don't want to not teach that child. So look at placement. Maybe that child would be placed in a different part part of the program a little bit more accurately. It's served them better.
And other people also wonder, won't the kids get awfully nervous if you have these story reading error limits and they might have to go back and reread? Don't they get too nervous and they'll just make lots and lots of errors?
Well, I think this goes back to something that we mentioned earlier in the tape, is that your behavior affects their behavior. We set it up as something that can be punishing and really tough and really hard, and making this error limit is going to take us all day. Yeah, that's going to make them nervous. But I think if we set it up as something that, hey, there's an error limit, let's see if we can beat it, it's a fun challenge, we've got a motivational system built into the program, most children aren't going to get nervous about it. And they're going to see if they can meet the challenge, and they're going to enjoy reading the story and understanding the story and being prepared for the worksheet activities that follow.
And that's been my experience too.
So far we've talked about story reading procedures in relation to decoding types of errors that the students might make. But there are other parts of the story reading that are very important, and that's the student's understanding of the story, the comprehension. That's why there are comprehension questions written throughout the passage. This is a place where students can make mistakes also. So we want to talk to you now about how to correct those kinds of errors.
There really are two different kinds of comprehension questions that you'll be asking students, and you can think of them in terms of questions that will reference information specifically in the story, and we call those literal information questions. The other kind would be questions that reference information that's not specifically in the passage. That information might come from the comprehension passage that the students read for that day. Also, sometimes there's serial stories, so the information might be asking a question about a story that happened, what happened in the story the day before. And those are questions that you won't be able to reference the information specifically in the story.
So for each of these kinds of errors, there are specific correction procedures. Let's take first the literal kind of question, in which the student is needing to answer a question, a comprehension question about something that was just read in the passage from today. We have an example that we want to take a look at on page 13 in your teacher's guide. I will begin reading at G, right after G, and Kathy will ask me comprehension question I, and I'll make a mistake on the answer, and then she will show you the correction that we need to do.
And actually, why don't you go ahead and start reading at H?
Start reading at H. Okay, you with us? Start reading at H, and Kathy will do a correction on that kind of literal comprehension question.
My question is over here on the right-hand column, so as you're looking at the story on the left-hand column, the comprehension is the double circle I. Go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, the trip from New York City to San Francisco is 2,500 miles. After leaving San Francisco, a plane must fly west for another 4,500 miles to get to Japan.
Okay, everybody, how far is it from San Francisco to Japan? Get ready?
500 miles.
Let's listen to that part again. After leaving San Francisco, a plane must fly west for another 4,500 miles to get to Japan. So, everybody, how far is it from San Francisco to Japan? Get ready?
4,500 miles.
4,500 miles, that's right.
Now, the correction that Kathy just gave me, she went back into the passage and read exactly what I had just read to give me the information that I needed to answer the comprehension question. What we're doing here is we're showing the students the strategy for getting the information that's going to help them answer the question. Another way in which we could do that very same correction is for Kathy to have, or the teacher to have, the student reread that sentence themselves. Either of those corrections will work just fine in this case, because the information to answer the comprehension question is coming from the passage. We don't want the teacher to just give the answer. That's not showing the students how to get information from what they've been reading.
That's also the reason we don't want to just call on another student to answer the question, because Tracy might decide that, well, she didn't know where that information came from, but Johnny always knows the answer to those things.
Right, and
we want her to know that that information was right in the passage that she read.
These are kinds of corrections that really take a lot of practice to learn. And one of the things that I've found very helpful to do in teaching the Reading Mastery series is to mark for myself if the question is a literal question, in other words, the information is right there in the passage, or if it's a question that's going to require some prior knowledge, in other words, information that has been taught previous in the program, the comprehension section, or earlier stories in this passage.
You'll see that on page 13, they list some of those things for you. They say it's either a map skill, or it's information recall, or literal information, but that is not going to be in your teacher's guide or in your presentation book when you teach the kids. So it would be a good idea to mark off which ones are literal.
Right. The best thing to do is to be prepared for all of the kinds of errors that might come along, and that just takes a lot of practice. And so as we move through this video, we're recommending that you stop and practice, and this is definitely an area to stop and practice. So on page 13 in your teacher's guide, you'll see the student materials and the teacher questions. What we want you to practice is the literal types of questions. Have the student go back and reread, or the teacher reread the information for the student and re-ask the comprehension question.
The other type of comprehension error that we talked about is when the information is not literally stated in the passage. This is a little trickier because you have to know where that information came from in order to give the kids the information to answer that question.
So being familiar with all the stories that you've read in this section is very important, in addition to being prepared for every lesson that comes along.
Let's go ahead and show you how to handle one of those, and then we'll stop and talk about that. We're going to be on page 13 of the Teacher's Guide again, and right after the letter I, Tracy's going to read down to the letter J, and there's some information that's going to require a recall of some map skills that was previously taught in the comprehension passages. So Tracy, why don't you begin reading at the paragraph after the letter I.
Okay, your model student here, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look at the map. It shows the world. Touch New York City on the map and follow the jet's trip to San Francisco, and then go on to Japan.
Okay, everybody, first go to New York, to San Francisco, and then stop. Okay. Now go from San Francisco to Japan. Okay. Now, what's the name of the ocean that you go over after leaving San Francisco? Get ready?
Atlantic?
No. The ocean that's between San Francisco and Japan is the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody, let's listen to that question again. What is the ocean that you go over after leaving San Francisco? Get ready?
The Pacific Ocean.
The Pacific Ocean, that's right. That was one of our map skills earlier. Okay.
Now you notice in that correction that Kathy just didn't tell me the answer. She gave me information so that I could answer the specific question. She didn't say, it's the Pacific Ocean. She gave me information that the ocean between San Francisco and Japan is the Pacific Ocean. Then asked the question that's phrased differently. What's the name of the ocean you go over after leaving San Francisco? It's really important not to just give out the answer, because then the students aren't using the strategies or the information presented from previous lessons, from comprehension sections, to answer the kinds of comprehension questions. After she gives me the information, then she asks me the same question again and stated it just as it had been stated before.
If I really want to be sure that these comprehension questions are firmed, and that's going to be a really important part because they're going to show up again in the student's workbook, when I get to the very end of the story reading, I'm going to go back and look at the questions that I marked that the students missed, and if they're important information that they need to know, I'm going to ask that question again. For instance, the one about the ocean between San Francisco and Japan. That's important information for the kids to know. And if they weren't too sure about that, when we get to the very end of the story reading, I'm going to ask the kids a few more questions that had to do in the story that you might have missed. So everybody, let's think about some things that we had trouble with in the story. After we talked about Herman flying from San Francisco to Japan, and there's a big ocean between San Francisco and Japan.
Right.
So everybody, what ocean is that? Get ready?
The Pacific Ocean.
Good, I didn't fool you that time. It's the Pacific Ocean. I want to make sure that they're firm on that because that question is going to come up in the workbook, and it probably will come up more often in the stories because those are the kinds of information that's integrated throughout the program.
The story is not just about a fly, it's about learning mapping skills, it's about timing issues. There are lots of pieces of information that are related to this story and other stories that will follow. So we want to make sure the students understand all of that. What we'd like to do now is to once again stop and practice using page 13 from your teacher's manual. I'd like you to start at the top of that page and go down all of those questions, having the students read and answering comprehension questions. And you've got both types of comprehension questions, literal comprehension questions and information recall types of comprehension questions. Plan ahead, know what kind of a correction that you would need to make based on the type of an error, and practice this a few times so you're very comfortable with it.
We presented two types of comprehension tasks that you would do a variation on a correction for, but there are lots of different kind of comprehension tasks within the program.
The program is really very complete in that we deal with sequencing kinds of issues that are common to all narrative stories. There are the information recall questions that we mentioned, literal types of questions. There are lots of mapping skills that are taught within the program. And there's also some interpretation types of questions that are asked. In other words, kids are going to be asked, if you were Herman, how would you feel? Those kinds of viewpoints and feeling kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm. And those are really difficult to correct. And you'll get a lot of practice as you go through the first year as a teacher of this program. But in your teacher's guide on page 33 to 36 is a very thorough explanation of the different types of questions and how to deal with those corrections. You should stop and read that now, but also as you continue your year of teaching, it will be really helpful for you to pick that section back up and look at it again, because as you get really good, you'll want to do better corrections with your kids all the time.
The teacher's guides for these programs are really very informative, and we highly recommend that you continue to look at those throughout your teaching.
We're going to do a timing now, Jeremy. Touch the first star on this page.
Right.
That's where you're going to begin reading. Touch
Okay.
the last star. That's where you're going to end reading. You're going to read as smoothly and quickly as you can, but not so quick that you make silly mistakes.
Okay.
Put your finger under the words when you're reading. Get ready. Wait for me. Get ready. Get set. Go.
Then the old man said, I don't have my good canoe anymore, but I have another another canoe that you may use. That canoe has a hole in the front. Here's the rule about that canoe. If you sit near the back, the canoe won't sink. I will remember that rule, Jane said. Jane got in the canoe and began to paddle. As pretty water lilies got stuck to the front of the canoe, Jane saw the water lilies and said to...
Stop. You made 2 errors, so you get 3 points. You can go back and put 3 points in the CO box of your workbook. Okay.
The instructions for you to give individual checkouts appear at the end of lessons 5, 7, 10, and every 5th Reading Mastery 3 lesson until the end of the program. The checkouts provide you with data on their accuracy and reading rate. This data helps you determine if your children are progressing acceptably or if you need to consider remediation or acceleration. To conduct checkouts, have the student sit next to you. Tell the student when to begin and time for 1 minute. Watch the student's material, tally errors, tell the word if the student hesitates more than 2 seconds. Errors are counted are word identifications, word omissions, and word additions. Also count repeated self-corrections as errors. While you are doing individual checkouts, you may wish to reinforce students for quietly completing their seat work. Read the detailed description of individual checkout procedures in your teacher's guide.
Okay, Jeff, your turn. 8C, read the item and tell me the answer.
One canoe's not moving. I don't like the law. That canoe C.
C. Everybody, we're ready for 9. Turn the page and leave your book flat. Good following directions. Excellent. Flat books on your lap. Okay, Jessica, will you read 9 and tell us the answer?
Name 2 kinds of canoes that Indians made. Bark canoes, dugout canoes.
Yes, bark canoes and dugout canoes. Right answer. Good job. Chelsea, number 10A.
Look at the picture below. Which letter is on the path? B.
Right on. Myra, 10B.
Which letter is in the middle of the lake? E.
Yep. Rochelle, 10C.
Which letter is on the shore of the lake? A.
Yes. Michael, 10D.
Which letter is in the field? D.
You guys know a lot about that picture. Let's go to 11A. Madeline, your turn. Good touching, everybody.
What's the name of pretty flowers that grow in water? Lilies.
Yes, water lilies. That's the right answer.
Take-home workbook exercises are presented after students have completed all of the activities from the storybook. These written comprehension exercises teach important test-taking type skills. They reinforce and apply the skills and strategies that have been taught in the lesson. They are designed to make the transition from directed to independent application. When an activity is introduced, the script in your teacher presentation book provides specific instructions that direct students step by step through the process. In lessons 1 to 15, check boxes that are provided to help the students complete the worksheet without skipping items are in the workbook. A box in the left margin next to each item serves as a reminder to the students to answer each item. In lessons A, B, C, and D, and lessons 1 to 10, the teacher directs individuals from the group through oral reading of all the workbook items. Reading the items is designed to ensure that the students are able to decode the questions. Then the teacher directs the students to answer orally. This prompts remembering. For lessons 11 to 15, the teacher directs individuals to read all the workbook items, but now students must recall the answers. For lessons 16 to 25, the teacher has individuals read those items that are based on the main story and new skill items, but not those items based on the comprehension passage or review items. Students do not answer orally. For lessons 26 to 35, the students read items to themselves, and then the teacher calls on students to read 2 items. Starting at lesson 36, students complete the workbook independently.
This is the workbook for the Reading Mastery 3 program. Each of your students will have a workbook that is filled with all of the independent work for all of the lessons in the Reading Mastery 3 program. This is lesson 54 that you also have in your teacher's guide. Inside of each lesson, there are a series of workbook tasks. If you'll notice, in section A, the students are working on some mapping skills. In section B are comprehension questions for the story that they read. There's also a section of skill items where students are working in this lesson on supporting evidence, as well as review items from previous stories.
Although the independent work is a very final component of a Reading Mastery 3 lesson, it's an integral part of the program, and you don't want to neglect it as a part of what's happening for the kids in the Reading Mastery 3 program. Here's why. This is an opportunity for the students to take the skills that they've learned in word attack, in vocabulary, in the comprehension passages, and what they're reading about the story, and show the teacher what they know at an independent level.
You're going to want to schedule enough time for the students to complete their independent work, so you'll want to plan about 20 to 30 minutes daily following the story reading if at all possible for students to complete this. It's best if the students can do it as soon as possible after the story reading rather than waiting until later in the afternoon or until the next day. The procedures that you're going to follow will be scripted in your teacher presentation book. For this particular lesson, the directions to the teacher are simply to have the students complete workbook 54. However, in the earlier parts of the lesson and intermittently throughout the program, there might be more information that you're going to need to follow in your teacher presentation book that will give you information of sections that you might need to do with the students or to demonstrate a particular new workbook item for them.
So the workbook items can become fairly routine for the students, and in some cases, when it is a routine, the script will be very limited. When there is something new, it's going to be a new format or a new series of questions or a new way in which the students are going to be asked to respond to some types of questions, in which case it's very important to follow the scripted format in the program so that you can get the students off on the right foot, so they can again show you what it is that they know about the program versus being confused by the format and how they need to respond. Regardless of if it's a new routine or an old routine, it's very important to set the students up correctly when they go to independent work. And what we'd like to talk about now is the teacher's role in setting expectations for the students when they go to the independent desks to complete their workbooks.
Okay. Tracy's going to show us what it is that she's going to do as a teacher. I finished the story reading and I'm part of the class, and she's going to give us the teacher expectations for what we're going to be doing.
All right, let's see if we can get this done now. We've just finished the story. You guys did an excellent job today. There were only 3 errors, and I'm very proud of your work. And people did a nice job answering comprehension questions, too. Now it's time for independent work. Today's independent work is work that you've done before, so I want you to go back to your desks quickly and quietly, open up your workbooks to lesson 54, complete those assignments, work at each problem very, very carefully, make sure you complete each item. I want you to make sure today that you're writing complete sentences and showing your very best handwriting. When you have a question about what's going on in your workbook, remember to raise your hand and wait until I can come to you. And when you finish the workbook, what I want you to do is to make sure you put it in the basket on my desk. Okay? I want everybody to quickly and quietly go back to their desks, and we'll be ready to roll. So what I tried to do in those expectations, there goes Kathy over to her desk tour. What I tried to do in those expectations was to let the students know that they're going to be completing this independently, that they should be doing it quietly at their own desks, and then I had expectations in terms of their behavior as well. They needed to use complete sentences. They needed to be writing in the best handwriting. I have roles for those students in terms of if they're having questions, how they're going to get information from me as their teacher, and then what they need to do with it when they've completed their work.
The other thing that you need to be concerned about is the motivation for the students to complete their work, meeting the teacher's expectations of being neat, working quietly. And you can use a number of different systems to help provide some external motivation for kids. Most teachers do, go over and correct the workbook and give the students the feedback, but you might want to be using the point system that goes with the book, where students earn points for their workbook. You also might want to, for some students, add some stickers or stars or have a star chart posted in your classroom, or have the whole class work for a goal of maybe 5 extra minutes of recess if they do a particularly nice job at meeting one of the goals.
Right. The motivation and the reinforcement systems don't need to be an expense for you, but they are motivation for the students, in which case you're going to work to get the best information from them as possible to see if students are in fact at mastery on these particular skills.
Following the student's completion of their workbook, you're going to want the students to conduct a work check. This is the time where the students will be correcting their workbook to see how well they did. They will be marking their answers on whether or not they got them right, and items they get wrong they'll be fixing up.
It's real beneficial for the students to get this feedback right away. So right after everyone has completed the independent work, it's nice to pull the group back together and do this work check. That way they know what they've done correctly and they're getting immediate feedback on what they need to fix up.
You want to schedule about 5 to 7 minutes for the work check. There are several different ways in which you conduct the work check. We're going to share some procedures that we find to be most efficient for that.
To begin with, it's most efficient to work with the kids in a large group. Pull the group back together again and have the students do their checks right away. One of the things that we suggest is that they do their work check in a different colored pencil or pen. So you may have some marking pens to the side of your group for the students to work with. It's also very efficient to have the teacher read the questions that the students are having to answer, and then different students in the group or the group can answer questions that they've done in their independent work.
The one thing you'll not want to do is have students exchange workbooks. A lot of students don't like other kids to mark in their book. And also, you want the students to be able to read their own answers and put down and make changes if they've answered any of the questions incorrectly.
It's a very efficient feedback kind of a system. One of the things that's also very important is that the teacher needs to monitor and circulate among the students as this work check is taking place.
After the work check, all the students are going to be fixing up their answers, any that they missed, so that at the conclusion of the work check, their paper should be 100% correct. But that doesn't mean it's time for you to send them home. The students still need to turn their workbooks into you so that you make sure that the students have done their corrections accurately.
So at the time of the work check with the group, what's most likely going to be taking place is that the students will be reading their own responses, looking to see if it's correct or incorrect, and marking that item with a C or a check mark. Those that receive a check mark, they're going to go back and fix up. And as Kathy said, before those workbooks go home or before they're considered finished, all of the items need to be 100%.
Okay, everybody, we're ready for item 6. Remember, we're putting C's right next to the item number in the margin. If you get it right. If you get it wrong, remember to put the X right next to the item number. Okay, I'm going to read item 6. What ocean do you cross to get from San Francisco to Japan? Everybody?
Pacific Ocean.
Yes, if you got that right, put a C. Number 7. What did Herman get stuck in? Everybody?
A spider web.
Yes, if you got that right, put a C. If you missed it, put an X. Number 8, everybody. Cross out Herman's enemy. Which one is Herman's enemy? Which letter? Get ready.
B.
Yes, what is that enemy? Get ready.
Spider.
Exactly. Mark yours. Everybody, we're going to do the review items now. 10A, everybody touch. In each picture below, draw a circle around every plane that will go the fastest. Everybody touch picture A. There's an arrow at the bottom of picture A. That arrow shows which direction those planes should be going. Everybody, with your finger, show me which direction those planes should be going. All right, now everybody touch the 2 planes that you drew circles around.
Now practice conducting a work check. Use pages 14 and 15 in your teacher's guide. If you wish to review procedures, these are on page 40.
Everybody, may I have your attention, please? Good, following teacher directions. Thank you for leaving your books flat on the desks. You're going to play the fact game that uses facts that you've learned. Today you're going to play the game with 2 dice. The rest of the rules are the same as the rules for the first game we played. The player rolls the 2 dice and figures out how many dots are showing. The player finds the question that has the same number as the dots. The player reads that question out loud and answers it. The monitor tells the player if the answer is right or wrong. If it's wrong, the monitor says the right answer. If it's right, the monitor gives the player 1 point. Don't argue with the monitor. After a player has a turn, the dice go to the left and the next player has a turn. If a group plays the game smoothly, all players in that group will earn 5 points. I'll tell the groups whether they earn the bonus points. Each player who gets more than 13 points for the game will earn another 5 bonus points. You'll play the game for 20 minutes. Okay, everybody, I'll be coming down around to groups and I'll be handing out pencils and dice. Amanda, would you be monitor for this game? Okay. Amanda, look on page 233. And find fact game 2. That's the game we're playing. Everybody else, your books are on page 221. Okay, fact game 2. And Jeff, you start. Your turn. Go for it.
7. Tell the row from all the lines that are 171. A, C, B, and C.
Yes. Everybody remember to put your finger beside the item that Chelsea's doing.
Tell the letters for the lines that are 1 centimeter long. A and C. Yes. Six.
Good touching, Jeff.
Okay. Which arrow shows?
There is a fact game specified after every 10th lesson in Reading Mastery 3. Student game sheets appear at the end of the workbook. Detailed scripted instructions appear in your teacher presentation book for the first game you conduct. Even though it is fun for students, this important activity provides them with lots of practice with facts and rule application. Fact games may be scheduled during the regular reading period or during another part of the day. However, they are not to take the place of the daily lesson. Read about fact games on pages 45 through 47 of your teacher's guide.
Hopefully this video has given you enough information that you can get started being a really effective Reading Mastery 3 teacher. We tried to show you the procedures that you would use in the different parts of the lesson so that you can practice on your own and become a very effective teacher.
Kathy and I have really enjoyed teaching this program to lots of children and working with other teachers that are working with children and found it very helpful and very effective. These procedures can be used with the Reading Mastery 3 program as well as the entire Reading Mastery series.